I'm Dr. Lou Mix, past president of Dairy Shrine from Syracuse, New York. I'm interviewing Dr. George Trimberger, professor emeritus in the Department of Animal Science at Cornell University, Ithaca, New York. Dr. Trimberger is an internationally known author, researcher, teacher, coach, and judge of dairy cattle. He was president of Dairy Shrine in 1973-74 and was the recipient of its prestigious Guest of Honor Award in 1982, as well as the PDCA Distinguished Service Award in 1985. He's known and loved by his former students and thousands of dairy cattle breeders across the country. George, tell our audience where you were born and raised, and where and when you received your undergraduate degree in agriculture.
I was born in northern Wisconsin, at Neillsville, Wisconsin. That's way up north, but they have a lot of good dairy cattle there now. And then when I was 5 years old, we moved to Calumet County, which is known as the milk vein of the world. And we were located at Chilton, Wisconsin, which is about equal distant between Fond du Lac and Manitowoc and Sheboygan and Green Bay. Yeah. And then I went to the University of Wisconsin and got my BS degree there in 1933.
Then you moved on to the University of Nebraska as herd manager. How long were you in that position?
I was herd manager for 6 years and then teaching and research for 4 years. So I had a total of 10 years at the University of Nebraska. And the first 6 years I literally lived with cows, and that was a great experience.
What was your goal when you went on for your master's and doctorate at the University of Nebraska?
Well, my goal was to teach and research at a university, and I immediately, when I had my master's, realized I need my PhD, and I got both degrees while I was working full-time, but working long hours during the day.
Very long hours. Somewhere along the way you met your lovely wife and devoted wife, Eleanor. Where was that?
That was a great day, Lou. That was at the University of Nebraska. When she graduated from the university, it was during the Depression and jobs were very, very scarce, but she got a job working in the dairy husbandry department at the University of Nebraska. So putting her every day, I walked by her desk, and I soon took notice.
I can understand that. Our paths first crossed about 40 years ago when we were taking Dr. Jack Loosely's course in animal nutrition at Cornell University. You remember that?
Yes, I remember that. I needed credits to transfer to the University of Nebraska, but our paths have crossed many, many times after that, and I've always admired your work on what has passed in milk production, in milk sales, in prices, and then your predictions for the future, which were very, very accurate.
Thank you.
And you're still at that.
That's right. What brought you to Cornell in '44?
Well, several things. First, I saw a picture in Hard's Dairyman where the extension folks had their sleeves rolled up and looked like work, and they looked like a keen group, and that gave me respect for the university, which I had previously. Actually, Lou, they asked me to come in 1941. And we weren't smart enough at that time, or we had some other factors to consider to accept. So fortunately, they asked again in '44, and I readily accepted and have enjoyed my work in New York State tremendously.
Well, we're the ones that have benefited from that. Tell us a little bit about your early research in animal physiology and dairy herd management.
Well, I have 186 publications, half of which are scientific. And for 8 years, I've bred the University of Nebraska herd, entirely artificial, doing it all myself. And that time, I wanted to have more information on the timing of service. So I had an experiment with a lot of cows bred. That is, we kept track at 2-hour intervals when they came into estrus, when they went out, how long the estrus was, and then what their rate of conception was, bred at various intervals. And that gave me a clue then when they had to be bred, how you had to observe when they're in heat, and then how much time you had afterwards to bred it. Then I got curious what happens inside the cow during that time. So we had one on ovulation, about the same number of cows, 150, 60 or more. And we kept track of 2 hours intervals when they went out of heat and then how long we had to breed. And that produced excellent results for the timing in artificial insemination. And at later years, maybe 10, 15 years later, Bob Foote laid those two researches side by side, and the graphs coincided almost perfectly. And it was used extensively. Probably 80, 90,000 copies were distributed on the timing of artificial breeding based on these two researches. And I know I carried them to Ohio for several artificial breeding associations there and had a participation in their annual meeting.
It was an excellent piece of work. When did you first begin coaching the Cornell dairy judging team?
That was in 1947. And at that time, I switched from extension. The first 3 years were in extension, and then I had teaching and research. And this was my first team, and they immediately were a winner. There were 1, 2, 3 at Eastern States in the regional contest, and there were 1, 2, 5 at the national at Waterloo, Iowa.
I remember some of those days. In those days, the National Collegiate Contest was held at Waterloo, wasn't it? And what do you especially remember about coaching some of those early teams in the late 40s and 50s?
At that time, Waterloo was a wonderful place to go. All the known breeders were there representing their cattle. The dairy shrine was just across the road. The judging team had invitations to have their lunch over there, and that was a big treat because times were tough in those days. And in particular, what impressed me was the breed association secretaries donning an apron and other folks from industry and serving the guests there.
I remember
and that made quite an impression. Folks like Itzy, Musser, and Conklin,
right,
and so on down the line.
I remember those days. I had the Minnesota team there, and I know what it meant to have those lunches. Many of your team members have gone on to positions of leadership in the dairy industry. How do you feel that judging teams' experiences prepare students for positions in the industry and maybe more importantly for a satisfying life?
It's an excellent experience, Lou, because they have the training in observation, in analysis, in evaluation, and then in reaching a decision and then defending that decision. The observation is a big one. Half of the dairy cattle judging team members here in New York State are with dairy herds on farms. And the observation is a big one. Often they can anticipate cows that are going to be sick the next day or something like that and keep ahead of that. Many of them are in education work. There are a number of veterinarians. There are several doctors, MDs, and there are quite a number of lawyers in that other 50%. And your own brother is with the Holstein-Friesian Association. First he was in charge of their type classification system, and then in their international work, and he has done an excellent job there. So there are many places, but they have benefit. I've heard him say at state breed meetings, since one of these got up and gave us a short presentation. Then they turn over to me and say, being on a judging team, never heard him any.
I can identify with that. Your success as a coach of 24 outstanding dairy judging teams is nationally recognized. How many times were your teams victorious at the national contest?
7 times we had the national championship team in all breeds. Half of the teams in the regional contest were winners, and then half of the teams of the 24, 12 of them were in the first 3. The last team in 1974 was second to Iowa, and we had 3 girls on the team that year, and they did an excellent job.
That's an enviable record. You put a lot of emphasis on team effort. How did you motivate your students to achieve this team effort?
Many ways, and we could take the rest of the morning for that, Lou, but primarily by making them a part of it and listening to the records, to their reasons, recording them on a record, and then playing them back and getting the spirit to win among them. So among the 7 winners, we had 4 that were high men on the contest, which includes Dick Keene on a farm in eastern New York at Gilbertsville, and he's probably judged more cattle and in more states and in more countries during recent years, and he's still right at it, than anybody else at any time.
All over the world. Your textbook, Dairy Cattle Judging Techniques, has been widely used across the country by both college and 4-H teams. What need did this book fill?
This is the book right here, and before the year is over, we'll have the 4th revision to this. This started in 1958. It filled the need to standardize and crystallize type so people knew exactly what they were looking for. And it's used extensively among 4-H and their college students in their judging work and so on. So it has tended to emphasize the important points, the practical points, the functional points, and then to combine it with precision. Mm-hmm. And that has worked very well.
Well, this new edition that you just showed us will soon be available. Who were the co-authors of that?
I have this will be the front cover, Lou, of it. And the co-authors are William Etkin at VPI in Virginia, and then a new one, David Galton, here at Cornell, who's doing excellent work with the judging team. He'll be the 3rd author then, so I have 2 co-authors, and it's just 20 years apart between all 3 of us each way. First 20 years apart between me and Bill, and then 20 years between Galton and I.
What are some of the features of this new book?
Well, it particularly emphasizes the fact that type and production are now together in dairy cattle, and it is possible to breed for both, and it is necessary to breed for both. In the first chapter and in the last chapter, we make the statement that production is basic. You've got to have it. But type is needed to give you longevity, to give you staying power, to give you a high lifetime production, and that fits the economy, to cut down veterinary expenses. And the practical dairymen are very much interested. And to show that the type and production is combined, let me tell you about these 3 cows. All 3 of them are all-time All-American. They fill the all-time All-American classes. The Gina cow here in New York is all-time All-American 2-year-old, all-time All-American 3-year-old, and reserve all-time All-American 4-year-old. And she has some beautiful records. I'll refer to it later. Here's a very, very high producer, and she's the all-time All-American 4-year-old. All 3 of these cows are 3 times All-American, and they're all scored 97, and they're all excellent producers. This is the ultimate, and you've never had that before in dairy cattle. And here is the famous Ella cow, originated in Pennsylvania. And she's the all-time All-American age cow. She's number 1 on the production list that's published, and the highest milk producer. She's also number 1 on the list of daughters for her sire, and there are 54,000 daughters that are classified from that bull, and she's number 1. She's at the top of the list. And he also has some 40,000 classified daughters. And there is I could elaborate on the bull a little bit later, but here is a new peak in dairy cattle breeding, and first in production and first in type, all-time All-American. You have the 2 together, and what a beautiful combination that is. And that has much practical importance.
I saw that Charity cow solo last summer. That was quite a sight.
Probably as good a cow as ever walked in the ring, Lou.
Beautiful animal. What are some of the improvements that you've noticed in dairy cattle type over the last 30 years?
Tremendous improvement, demonstrated by the fact that when in '84 they named the all-time All-Americans, only 1 female from the previous list got in the new list. In other words, right there you have improvement. And the emphasis on dairy character has resulted in show cows that produce and tremendous production, just as I indicated on those.
Yeah.
And good management has been combined with that. The cow that was twice all-time All-American here, for example, she calved at 110 senior yearling and produced almost 17,000 pounds of milk. She calved again at 2 years, 9 months. That's when at one time a lot of cows calved, and had 23,000 pounds of milk. Calved at 3 years, 9 months, calved at 4 years, 9 months, 5 years, 9 months, and had 27,000 pounds of milk there on her last record. So
that's consistent, isn't it?
That's where some of your improvement comes. And uniformly, big classes with the type is very, very uniform. Actually, almost easier to judge than when you have tremendous variation.
Yes. You were instrumental in the Holstein descriptive type classification program. How widely has this program been used?
Very widely, and I'll go back to the time that are written that of the origin of this. The Holstein Association decided that they needed to make some changes on this, and it came right through their official board of directors, and they decided that at that time, because type and production was very, very controversial, and the pieces weren't fitting together. And it was a little too much on exotic points rather than on the practical points, the functional points. I can see Rummler stand in my living room there now, ask me, he said he's already been to the dean, would I take the assignment to revise that? And that had been previously approved by the board, Holstein Board of Directors. And the first thought that flashed through my mind was, as controversial as it is, a man would be kind of foolish to get into that battle. And then the next thought, just like this, why, this is an obligation.
What an opportunity.
It's an opportunity. And in 20 seconds, I said I'd be delighted to do it. And we traveled all over the United States during those 3 months, had selected meetings, decided on practical, functional type traits. And the breeders liked that. And at that time, there were no heritability points, but if you have flat feet, if you have bad pasterns, if you have sickle legs, which aren't too bad nowadays, but the straight legs are very bad, and those things, they must have heritability when they run in daughters of bulls and so on, and in cow families. And when they figured the heritability, they had very, very good heritability. And there was one point particular, the medial suspensory ligament, the most important of the 7 attachments. And we debated quite a bit, is that too academic? And we decided it must go in there because it's so important. And the breeders took to that like duck takes to water, because it had the practical importance of holding the udder up, and a marked improvement was made on udders. So to sugar off on this question, though, in the next 16 years, each year there were larger number classified, and during those 16 years there were over 4 million classified, as is reported in this Progress of the Breed, that was put out last year at their centennial meeting.
Yeah. And I bought a copy of that last summer.
Oh yes, that's a good book.
It really is.
And that is 250,000 cows a year. But then to sharpen up the inheritance of it, to measure inheritance from bulls and like, it was put on a linear basis where it goes from straight legs to crooked legs, and then you can
all gradations,
and you can get a higher heritability on that, but it still maintains the functional type traits in a linear form.
Yes, that was a real contribution. George, you've been retired now for several years, but you've kept an active interest in breed organizations, dairy cattle shows, and in people. What plans do you have for the future?
My future plans are very simple. I'm at 76 years of age here. I'm going to lean on leisure time. I've never had any leisure time. When I had a job, it was Saturday and Sunday and all the time, long hours, getting my degrees while I was working. So now it's going to be leisure time, and then I'm going to sit back and count my blessings that I had the opportunity to associate with the many fine dairy breeders, with the folks in education, with folks interested in dairy shrine people, and many others, and what a satisfying experience this was. So I'm going to count my blessings, Lou.
Don't blame you.
And enjoy myself.
You've made a great contribution. The dairy industry just owes you a debt of gratitude, George, for the many contributions you've made in research, and teaching, type appraisal, judging, and as a developer of future leaders. We certainly appreciate your taking the time this morning to reminisce about some of these milestones along the way. And just thank you so much. You've made a great contribution to the dairy industry.
Thank you, Lou. It was a privilege and honor.